Today I'm going to talk about the connection between philosophy and sociology. Philosophy is really mainly about meaning, and sociology is about social behavior. And the idea behind this particular lecture is that Mothering Sunday is coming up very shortly on the 27th of this month. And I wanted to relay a particular story about an event celebrating Mothering Sunday. On this strange occasion, my wife and my two daughters went to a burger restaurant, and we celebrated at a so-called breakfast where lots of other people were also doing the same thing. The strangest thing about it was that in the room, which was about, big enough for about 20 or 30 people, there were lots of small round tables, usually with one very elderly lady and one slightly younger lady. So it's obviously a mother and daughter thing. And there they were, sitting almost in silence. There were a few families where some children were present, but the general mood was that nothing was being said by anybody, and they were solemnly sitting there eating their breakfast, we too as well. And if somebody had come in from another culture, they would have been wondering what the thing was all about. But the actual thing was all about because the restaurant had advertised a Mothering Sunday celebration, which was take your ma to have a breakfast there, which is not the sort of thing that most English people do. But the interesting thing about this, as I sort of scanned the room, I kept on scanning the room, there didn't seem to be much going on there. People weren't sort of talking with each other. They weren't touching each other. Sometimes they weren't even looking at each other. And it was the most sort of antisocial sort of gathering I think I'd ever been in. But anyway, when I got up eventually to walk out, I looked back at the room and I thought, this is really, really strange. What really was going on, and how did the people who were there make sense of what was going on? Well, my guess is that most of them had not the slightest idea about what Mothering Sunday was about. It's not about celebrating your own mother. It was a medieval thing where each locality was identified by a town, or a city was identified by a cathedral. And the cathedral was regarded as the mother church, and all the people who went to their local church, the little churches, their little parish churches, were regarded as the children. And interestingly, the only holiday that servants, mainly people who worked in rich people's houses, the only day that they had off in the whole year was on Mothering Sunday. And that was not to get flowers for their mum, but to take flowers from their local church to the cathedral church. So the idea of Mothering Sunday, although it's been sort of superimposed by people who manufacture gift cards and things like that, it never was in any way whatsoever a celebration of motherhood. It was a celebration of the togetherness, or mainly the control of the church. Now, the interesting thing about this was that I was trying to make sense of what sort of sense these breakfasters were making of it, and if they didn't have any idea about what I've just said about the original meaning, my guess is it was probably seen as more of an obligation that you do once a year, just to look after your mum. The interesting thing was, I think sociologically speaking, was the massive room in which this was taking place was actually in a house that was intended for the local priest in the days when the church was powerful. And the outlook from the window of that room was onto the church graveyard. So it was very, very near the church. The original Victorian priest would have very, very small distance to go to work. And interestingly, after a while, when it became too expensive to run servants, they started a small school, and these girls who attended the small school actually became their sort of trainee servants. The idea the idea behind trying to make sense of what people make sense of is actually a strange branch of philosophy. It's called phenomenology. And phenomenology is really about examining not just what people make sense of, but how they communicate what they make sense of something to other people. So in actual fact, if you like, it's the communication that occurs in cultures. But phenomenology is very, very sensitive. It's probably the most sensitive branch of philosophy because it's concerned with consciousness. It more or less says that what goes on in your mind is communicable with other people from the same culture. And so it's not just about what's called subjectivity. The phenomenology is mainly about intersubjectivity. In other words, the subjectivity that you share with other people. In other words, we don't make sense of the world ourselves individually. We make sense of the world through our social interactions, hence sociology. So that's really the meaning and, if you like, the investigations that I carried out. It's just quite simply, I mean, if you do sociology and if you do philosophy, then you don't walk around with books in your pocket. You actually sort of try and apply the theories that you know and understand. So, of course, naturally, if I go into a room and people are doing something strange or not doing anything strange, I like to observe what's going on. I'd like to see if they are responding to any kind of things that are being said or done, and whether they are really conscious of what the thing's about. My guess, in fact, I had a very strong feeling that none of the people in that room knew anything about what was going on. They were just sitting there rather glumly. There was a small table behind me, and there was an elderly mother looking at her middle-aged daughter. And I don't think a single word was actually said between them. In fact, most of the time they weren't even looking at each other. So, I mean, the elderly lady might have been there under sufferance, and the middle-aged daughter must have been sort of thinking, "Oh, I've got to do this for another year, I suppose." But anyway, that's it in a nutshell. Phenomenology, sociology, philosophy, and it's all in a book which I wrote, and which is the title is Mothering Sunday, and the subcontext is textualizing these interactions. In other words, how do people make sense of what is going on? Thank you.